Welcome to the Global African. Today's episode is really about pressure. Pressure on fuel, pressure on trade, pressure on food systems, and pressure on a world that already feels stretched. Let's begin from Nigeria because this one hits people right in the pocket. Petrol prices have climbed to a record high even though Dangote refinery is now running at full output. On paper, that sounds backwards. A huge refinery was supposed to help bring relief, but the deeper problem is that Nigeria still does not have enough locally available crude going into the plant because a lot of its oil is already tied up in debt-backed deals and pre-export commitments. At the same time, the current Middle East war has pushed global oil prices above $100 a barrel. Put those two things together and the result is pain at the pump. RT says gasoline is now selling around 1,400 naira per liter. This story is about the frustration of ordinary people living in an oil-producing country but still paying more and more to move around. Now, while Nigeria is dealing with price pressure, Sudan is dealing with something even darker. A paramilitary attack in Dailin in South Kordofan killed at least 14 civilians today, including 5 children and 2 women according to AP. The assault was blamed on the Rapid Support Forces and allied rebels, and it involved shelling residents' neighborhoods. This is bad. To understand why this matters, you have to remember that Sudan's war began in April 2023 as a power struggle between the army and the RSF. Since then, the country has been ripped apart by displacement, atrocities, and repeated warnings from rights groups and the UN. What makes today's attack especially sad is that Dailin had already been under siege conditions for a long time. So this is not just another tragic headline, it is part of a much bigger story of a war that keeps grinding down civilians town by town. Let's move to South Africa for a moment because South Africa has its own kind of pressure building. Citrus farmers are warning that diesel shortages and another fuel price increase could hit just as the April export season begins. South Africa is the world's second largest citrus exporter, and RT says it shipped a record 3.05 million metric tons last year. The industry depends heavily on road transport, with about 95% of citrus moved by truck to ports. So when diesel becomes irregular or more expensive, this is not just a farming issue, it becomes a job issue, an export issue, and a food chain issue. And there is another twist over here. Now, the Middle East is South Africa's second biggest citrus market. So a conflict far away is now threatening both the cost of getting the fruits to the port and one of the key destinations buying that particular fruit. Here is where the conversation shifts from fuel to the internet. In Cameroon, a major World Trade Organization meeting has ended without agreement on one of the most important digital trade questions in the world right now. And I would like to read your thoughts on this one in the comment section. Should countries be allowed to put custom duties on things like digital downloads, streaming, and other electronic transmissions? A moratorium that had protected those digital flows has now expired after talks ran out of time. Now, RT reports that the deadlock centered on how long any extension should last, with countries still divided over what is fair. This may sound technical, but it is actually a very modern power struggle. On one side are countries and companies that want digital trade to stay open and predictable. On the other are governments worried that they are losing tax revenue and policy control while big tech companies keeps growing. This is not just a World Trade Organization story. It is a story about rules of the online world and who writes these rules. Now to the ongoing US-Israel conflict, where the language is getting even more dangerous. AP reports that President Trump publicly floated the idea of seizing Iran's Kharg Island oil terminal, even while there are signs that indirect ceasefire talks may be starting. At the same time, Iran struck a key water and electricity plant in Kuwait, and attacks have continued across the region. Kharg Island matters because it is Iran's main oil export terminal, So when a US president openly talks about taking it, that is not just a dramatic quote. It is a signal of how much higher the stakes have become. This war is no longer only about missiles and military sites. It is also about oil flows, infrastructure, water, electricity, and whether any diplomacy can still work while the threats keep getting bigger. And before we close the main story, let's take a breath and take a look at entertainment. Now, Project Hail Mary is still flying. AP reports that Ryan Gosling's Sky fame made another $54.1 million in its second weekend and has now passed $300 million worldwide. Variety says that makes it Amazon's MGM's highest grossing film since the studio measure. It is not only the box office number, it is what the number represents. In a movie world full of sequels, reboots, and familiar brands, audiences are still showing up for a smart, original feeling science fiction story with heart. That says something hopeful about culture right now. People still want spectacle, yes, but they also want imagination. Now to our underrated genius moment. Today's name is Hedy Lamarr. A lot of people knew her as a Hollywood actress, but there's another side to her story that many people missed. During World War II, she co-invented a communication system designed to make torpedoes harder to jam. That idea later became part of the foundation for technologies like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and GPS. So in simple terms, one of the women once known mainly for film glamour also helped shape the wireless world we live in today. She wasn't just a star on the screen, she had a mind that was far ahead of its time. Now that's a genius. And here is today's fun fact. Sharks are older than trees. Yes. Sharks have been around for more than 400 million years while trees showed up much later. So yes, sharks were basically here before the forest. Nature really knows how to flex. Let me know which one stood out for you and remember to subscribe to the Global African for clear news and real perspective. See you in the next episode.